Hi, I'm attorney Jeremy Huss, owner of Huss Law. It is important for a person to know what their rights are during a DUI investigation. There are definite things a driver should refuse during this type of investigation. There are also some things that should not be refused. It is important to know the details of both. There are a couple of phases of a DUI investigation. The first phase occurs on the roadside after a traffic stop or contact. Law enforcement will come into contact with a driver either after a traffic stop where the vehicle was just in motion, or after contact where the vehicle is stationary and the driver may or may not be in actual physical control of the vehicle. Regardless of how contact is made, law enforcement is looking for the same thing upon initial contact with the driver: signs of impairment. Upon initial contact, officers will ask for identification and insurance. Immediately, the officer will begin looking for signs of impairment here, such as odor of alcohol, bloodshot eyes, slurred speech, and lethargic movements in obtaining the identification and insurance. A driver cannot legally refuse to provide their identification and insurance here. Specifically, a driver's failure to provide evidence of identity after a traffic stop is a Class 2 misdemeanor in Arizona. As such, when asked to provide this information after a traffic stop, one must comply. One need not provide any additional statements though. If an officer begins to ask where you came from and where you are going and if you've been drinking, politely but unequivocally advise that you want an attorney and do not wish to answer any questions. Again, law enforcement is looking for signs and symptoms of alcohol or drug impairment here. But truthfully, once law enforcement smells the odor of alcohol, the night is likely over and a full investigation will follow. Initially, law enforcement will offer the portable breath test, or PBT, and the standardized field sobriety test, or SFSTs. Both of these tests should be refused. The portable breath test is not admissible in court, nor is its refusal. Also, a person should never submit to standardized field sobriety tests. Many people feel they pass these tests. However, most do not appreciate what these tests are actually looking for. The standardized field sobriety tests are designed to test a person's ability to divide their attention. Alcohol and drugs impair a person's ability to divide their attention. Allegedly, a driver who cannot mentally follow instructions and physically perform movements in concert is also unable to divide their attention to safely operate a vehicle. Nevertheless, the short lesson from this discussion is that the portable breath test and standardized field sobriety test should be refused. However, after the roadside investigation, law enforcement may likely detain the driver and transport to a department or DUI van just due to the odor of alcohol. Upon arrival at whichever destination, law enforcement will read the admin per se implied consent affidavit. This affidavit advises a driver they are suspected of DUI and that law enforcement will choose a chemical test or combination of tests for the person to submit to. This will be a blood, breath, or urine test, or a combination of them. The admin per se implied consent affidavit further explains that if a person has a blood alcohol content of 0.08% or greater, then the person will lose their driving privileges for a period of 90 days. However, it also explains that if a person refuses to submit to the chemical test, it will result in a 1-year driver's license suspension. One should not refuse the chemical test. It will result in a lengthy suspension, and the state will get the blood alcohol content anyway. Specifically, after an admin per se implied consent refusal, law enforcement will obtain a search warrant very quickly. After getting the warrant, law enforcement will obtain a blood sample from the driver by force if necessary, as discussed in this Huss Law video. It is important to recognize the difference between the handheld portable breath test refusal and the chemical test. It is not advisable to refuse the chemical test. After obtaining the blood alcohol content sample, law enforcement will try to conduct more of a formal interview. Specifically, please ask several questions in this interview calling for incriminating answers. As discussed earlier, it is imperative a person not make any statements or answer any questions other than the required identity information. Every person has a right to remain silent and not be a witness against themselves. It is important to rely on this right. DUI investigations can be confusing. It is important every person knows their rights. I have been handling DUI cases in Arizona for 20 years. Call me today at Huss Law for a free consultation.